Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting and sight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on concealed carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell.
And I'm Dan Sams.
And it's going to be a good time. This is going to be a real good time.
We got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. I'm psyched about it.
We do. And, you know, before we get into anything serious, I got to share this movie review.
All right.
So in the great communist state of California, for our drinking friends, I wanted to give them a good, start off the podcast right. We've been closed for like a year, right? Yeah. Pretty much nothing's been open. Movie theaters have been closed. They just opened back up. But of course, there's no movies really to go see. Except there was one movie that I wanted to see for about the last month or so, but I haven't been able to go, called Nobody.
Oh.
Starring the guy that plays Saul Goodman in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. So
love that guy.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I am just going to go on record right now and say every single person listening to this podcast has to go see that movie. I mean, it was fantastic. There was so much mindless shooting and killing and like every gun you could possibly imagine. It was awesome. Christopher Lloyd was in it, and he's kicking butt, just like an old man with his hair slicked back and a double barrel shotgun and just taking out Russians left and right. I mean, it was awesome. It was so good.
I'm loving it, man. There's some legit people in this too, man. Like I'm looking at the list and I'm like, oh, this is fun. RZA from Wu-Tang is even in this.
I'm telling you, it was off the hook. I mean, so the credits start at the very end, right? And so, there's like 6 of us in the theater. And so, I'm getting up to leave. And then all of a sudden they do one of those scenes where all of a sudden they stop the credits and it's a scene and it's Christopher Lloyd and he's got 2 sons. One is Better Call Saul, right? The other one is a black kid. Obviously, adopted or whatever, who knows, but they're definitely a family. Like these 3 are a tight knit family. And you don't know it until, way later in the movie, how they're all related. And anyway, they're in like a Winnebago and they're like driving from Florida to California or something like that. And they're like, why don't we fly? I mean, why are we driving? It's really far. And one of them just kind of looks at the back of the car and is like, because of our cargo. And the other one kind of looks back and it's just loaded with guns, like every gun you could imagine. I mean, just AR on top of AR and AK. It's a gun lovers movie. You have to go see Nobody. It was fantastic.
I'm excited about it. It's on my list now, man. I'm going to have to see it.
It's going to be out of theater soon, which means it'll probably be on, Netflix or like Amazon tomorrow. Relatively quick. And here was the part that I thought was really good. So I don't even remember his name was like Hutch or something like that. Better Call Saul. That's all I can remember him as. And he's a skinny dude. Like you don't look at him and go, he's a badass. You're like, you're Better Call Saul. You're a Weasley little lawyer. Like that's who you can be. So when he gets into fights, he takes hits. Like that was the thing I thought was legit, right? Like this is, to me, I know this is a bold statement. This was better than John Wick. I know it's bold, but I got to put it out there.
What?
This was better, way better than John Wick 2 or 3 or 4, right? But maybe not as good as 1, but I'm telling you, it was that good. And the dude like takes hits. Like he's getting chomped up, but he just knows how to fight. And he can come back over the top. So it was great. It was a great movie. Highly recommend.
Nice. Awesome. I'm pumped about it. And it better be good now, man. If you're pumping it up on John Wick level, because like that's like the the gun movie tribunal will like condemn you for heresy. I mean, for talking down John Wick. So
I'm not saying his moves were as tactical as John Wick. Like, you could tell Keanu Reeves trained to be a gunfighter. Like, he's shooting in retention. I mean, he's doing proper shooting positions. This was just a great gun killing movie. Just mindless killing. It was fantastic.
That's what we love.
That's what I love.
Which, speaking of which, I can't talk detail, but let's just say some strategic things are moving that makes it one more step likely that our Die Hard youth pastor movie just maybe could possibly be like, I now see the pathway to how it could happen. And so let's just tell the Freedom Nation, I'm going to let you guys know in another maybe few months or years, we might be calling on you to call some specific people to try to make this thing happen. Just later on, like, just put it in the back of your mind. Let's just say connections might be happening like this week that would open up a door. It's not a connection for the idea. It's a connection for a connection. So just get in your brains. Because
awesome.
I'm so excited, man. I got to see Nobody now.
I'm telling you, everybody's got to see Nobody. Like, it was just a great movie from start to finish.
That's what I'm talking about, man.
Yeah.
Exciting.
And we got the Russians. That's all I'm saying. We got those Russians.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, man, there's all kinds of things we can be talking about, man. There's and if anybody's following our Telegram feed, all kinds of interesting wild memes, of course, are being passed on, but also like wild stuff related to China, and it's just exciting times. You got to be on that feed. But I think we shared it on there. I think we need to talk about this whole Santa Barbara ghost gun situation. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. The ridiculous. Our guns are able to track down ghost guns now.
Yeah. So I just want to point out, so essentially the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department say they have a dog that is trained to sniff out, quote unquote, ghost guns. And depending on which article you're reading about it, they're referencing polymer lowers, and they're saying that dogs can sniff out polymer lowers that don't have serial numbers on them.
Well, what they were saying is, it can sniff out a polymer 80, which is the ghost gun main manufacturer out there. It's like, but any gun that's made from polymer is polymer. How's the dog telling the difference?
So essentially, they're making a statement. This is an example of how I would argue our news media and other people in charge make statements that are just inherently deceptive. Like, that's just a deceptive. Unless there is some type of a filament that only polymer 80 uses, and that somehow that can be sniffed out, which I don't think any of us know about. Like, it's just polymer.
Well, they were also saying it could even sniff out the uppers. And I'm like, dude, shut up.
That's an example of either such ridiculous ignorance on the part of that sheriff's department, or I would argue it's plain deception. Like, that's just deceptive. Like, I don't think there's anybody that ignorant who works in that industry. There might be, because there's some pretty dumb guys that they hire. But it's just crazy. And I think about that piece of news goes out to the nation, and then a whole group of people build their belief on it, right? And so it's kind of like when CNN released the video and the guy made a comment about going full semi-automatic.
Oh, yeah.
And which caused everybody to think that semi-automatic, some people were already thinking that semi-automatic was fully automatic. And these are the kind of things where then we're actually battling. Like, this is false information. This is propaganda. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. But they'll say, well, I read the news about it. And to them, that means it's true. So when those of us who actually know, and we're not even experts, we just know the difference between, smelling a polymer with a serial number and smelling a polymer without, knowing that it's the exact same thing. So anyway, that's just another example of ridiculousness.
One article I read that was really great is, it goes, can you imagine the sensitivity that dog's nose has to have to be able to smell there's not as much metal on this particular gun because this one has the serial number filed out, and so, there's a difference in the amount of metal that this gun has. It's like, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It is. It's ways that people are controlling things.
But let's face the facts here. This is California. So if there is a dog that can smell out a polymer 80, it's going to be here in this state.
Yeah. If they're going to breed dogs somehow to do something like that, that's where they're going to do it, because that's where they care about that.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Hey, in other news, I read this morning there was a armed citizen who used a rifle, they believe, to stop an attempted mass shooting.
Nice.
And this was in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And it unfortunately left one elderly woman dead. But what was scary is basically this dude was standing out in front of this apartment building. And I think he lived there, and he's yelling at everybody to get out of the building. And you guys get out here, come out here, everyone get out of the building right now. I mean, that's what he's yelling at the building. And so people started to come out, and a couple came out, they see he has a gun, and they ran back in, closed the door, locked it. Two elderly ladies come out, they see he's got a gun. One runs back in, the other one runs back in, but doesn't close her door. And so then he goes in and kills her. And one of the other people who lived in the apartment building gets his rifle and goes to work and stops the dude from killing anybody else.
Good for him, man.
But I mean, think about how, like, that's a crazy form of evil, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm just going to call everyone outside so I can kill them all. I mean, that's a crazy level of evil. Yeah.
That's unfortunately the mentality of our culture of death right now.
Yeah.
And,
and you gotta, I mean, but just like we always say, stay strapped or get clapped. I mean,
exactly right.
And the reality is, depending on where you live, you may or may not carry in your house. Like, I know a lot of people who do carry in their homes. I know we've got listeners to the podcast who carry in their homes. And honestly, they live in areas I'd be carrying in my home too. Like, if I lived in most parts of Arizona, especially down near the border, I'd be freaking carrying from the moment I walk up. I'd have the shower gun, right? You read about the guy who chased someone out of his house because he had a shower gun? Like, that would be me if I lived in most parts of Arizona. But I mean, at the same time too, I mean, there's a reason why states have the castle doctrine, right? I mean, like, your home is supposed to be your castle, the place that you're safe, the place that you don't have to worry about anything. And that's why whenever someone breaks into a home, I mean, I'm not a lawyer here. I'm not trying to give out legal advice, but if you shoot someone to defend yourself in your home, you're almost always going to be cleared because it's your home and you're supposed to be able to be safe there. Now, again, there's always exceptions to that. I would actually argue in California, for all of our drinking friends, you'd probably still have to face the music in California, right? I mean, you're just going to get arrested. I mean, that's actually one of the reasons why I highly recommend you get the CCW insurance, right? Yeah. The guys that'll, pay for your defense, because if you ever have to use, you're going to face legal consequences. I mean, that's just the bottom line. You're going to have legal consequences for it. But, but I mean, just even the idea, that I'd have to carry in my apartment, it's not a comforting thought. Let me put it like that. It's not a comforting thought that I'd have to do that. But unfortunately, things are crazy enough that you got to have your firearms easily accessible, whether that means carrying it or, strategically positioned throughout your residence. You got to do what you got to do.
No joke, man. It's the old, adage about, better to be tried and save your life. But that is the benefit of one living
by 12 than carried by 6.
Yeah, but that is the benefit, one, of living in a state that has some castle doctrine laws. Secondarily, as you mentioned, having that conceal carry insurance is just a good thing. And of course, the other thing we always say, like, man, Don't talk to cops. I mean, there are times where there's a necessity in having a certain type of conversation, but like, man, so many times things go wrong. And so lawyer up and just be careful. That's you better to not talk than accidentally say something that gets you incriminated, even when you're innocent.
Yeah, I've heard, in fact, Lance Boland, who we've had as a guest on here, and I want to have him back on again. He had a great line, and I'll have to get that from him. But one of the things that I would always say is, look, I'll be happy to give a full statement after I've talked to my attorney.
Oh, that's a good one.
And then you're just kind of like, well, and the other part was you're supposed to throw in, I want that guy arrested. Like, I don't care if he's dead on the ground. You say, I want that guy arrested, and I'll be happy to give a full statement after I've talked to my attorney. Yeah. And, I feared for my life. Throw that one in there. I feared for my life. I want that guy arrested. I'll be happy to give a full statement after I've talked to my attorney.
That's good.
You want that written down. That, what did he say? He said, I want that guy arrested. Who do you want arrested? You always want the bad guy arrested. So if you're the guy saying he's the bad guy, that helps you.
It does. Yep. It's funny, but those little pieces make a difference. Some of it that sounds silly to us. We're like, well, how much difference? Like, think about how the slightest little use of language makes a difference on people's perceptions. And so making sure that that's, that it's turned in the right direction, so that they look at the innocent guy as the innocent guy and the guilty guy as the guilty guy is important. What a mess.
Yep.
So interesting things, man. So what's anything else going on we should talk about?
You had a couple of things I think that you wanted to mention. I don't remember what they were right now.
Well, so a thing crossed my mind. So this past week, we the gun store did a sale for just rock bottom prices on ARs. They were a little bit overstocked. Always tricky in the gun business. We're trying to keep up with demand, and so you order a little bit. And so we actually had a little bit of a time. We're like, man, we actually have a little bit more. This doesn't happen often, but more on the shelves than we wanted to have. And so we're like, let's go ahead and do a little sale and get rid of some ARs. So I had a few friends that, immediately were like, all right, so sale on ARs, I'm getting out there. And it hit me that in the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I'm having a different kind of conversation with gun buyers. So if you guys remember early in COVID, we had people who never had bought a gun before, all of a sudden wanted a gun. And I mean, most of what they were buying, they were going out and getting Smith & Wesson EZs. They were getting a Glock. They're getting your standard first gun type gun. And nothing wrong with that. It's wonderful. It's a good way to start. But people got their defense pistol, right? And a lot of them went and got their concealed carry permit. Wonderful. It was great. But as time goes on and things are getting shaky in other ways, we should say, people are saying like, it might be that I'm not just going to have to defend myself against rioters. I might have to defend my freedom against more organized people who want to take away my freedom. I'll say it that way. And so the interest in ARs is increasing, but most people who are even gun enthusiasts, talk to a lot of guys and they've got their Henry rifle with buckhorn sights, which we all love. Our Henry rifles, they're wonderful, but it's not going to probably be your primary fighting weapon. Although, man, if that's all you got, that's your fighting weapon. You use that thing, man.
Headshots.
Yeah, I would say like, man, you pull out that 4570, you can do some damage with that old
thing.
There
you go.
Let's vibe check some plates. Anyway, so all that said, though, I'm seeing now that we're at a point where a new group of people are ready to buy their second gun, and it's usually going to be an AR. They've got their carry defense pistol, they've got their home defense gun. Now they're ready to have something that's kind of next level, and so they're going to AR-15s. And so inevitably, what happens is they're like, all right, so I'm ready to buy my AR-15. What should I get? And the world of AR-15s is such a wide world. I mean, it's the big question that we would ask very first, like, okay, what are you going to use it for? Are you going to use it for medium range shooting? Are you going to use it for close quarter combat? Yeah. Are you looking to use it for competition? And so it's going to be, are you going to do it in a pistol caliber? Like, there's all these questions. Is it going to be a pistol? Are you going to do an SBR and register it? Are you going to put a suppressor on it or not? There's all these things to consider. And so I wanted to just talk first to the guys, and feel free, Pete, jump in. First to the guys that are on a budget, because I recognize that's where I was coming from. I ended up just taking a long time on my first build, and I built a nicer gun. But if you're just looking to get into it, you want a fighting weapon now. Pete, what would you say is like, all right, this is a good AR to get into that's going to be high quality, reasonable price, easy maintenance? What's a good first start?
Ironically, I would actually argue that almost all ARs are going to be great for what you're looking for, like that first time home buyer. Like when you've got a mil spec AR, they're pretty much, kind of doesn't matter whose brand is on it. It's all going to function the same. Yeah. So honestly, when you're looking at mil spec, I don't think it matters. I really don't.
I'm going to say if it's truly mil spec.
If it's truly mil spec, which again, mil spec means there's a range, right? Like it's not, it has to be this, there's a range.
Yeah.
So, but usually for the most part, you're going to be just fine. Yeah. And again, it depends on what you're using it for. Like if you're using it for target shooting, what's the distance at your range? Like you go to an indoor range, you might be looking at 25 yards. Yeah. Great indoor ranges might be all the way up to 50. But that's about it. So, if that's what you're looking at, again, kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah. So here's what I would say, though. A lot of guys, I would be cautious. Some of these, I have not heard great reviews about Delta Team Tactical. I'm not comfortable saying that that's truly mil spec. But Palmetto, everybody makes fun of Palmetto. Not everybody, but Palmetto's mil spec. You're going to get a good gun, as far as I'm concerned. A lot of guys jump in and they get that Smith & Wesson M&P.
Yep.
That's a good start off, ready-built gun. One thing to consider, and I would say also Ruger. The Ruger 5.56 is a nice, low-cost, quality gun. Here's what I would tell you. Think about whether or not you're going to want to do that A2 handle with the carry handle, or whether or not you're going to want to do a flat top AR. I'm going to say I prefer that flat top AR because I've got a little bit more variety. If you want to put some kind of an optic on an A2 carry handle, it's going to be way up high, and you can still do it. It's all right. But my buddy is jumping in behind the shot here. But you can still do it, but just worth considering. The other thing is you think about the A2 front sight with the big triangle in the front. That limits you because that's tied into your gas block. And so if you're going to use it as your rugged fighting, I'm not going to do anything long distance. I don't want to put an optic on it. I want it as bare minimal, simple, but rugged as possible. Get yourself that Smith & Wesson M&P 15. Get it with the A2 handle and A2 front sight. And you're going to do a great job. It's going to do what you need to do. It's going to be basic, but it's going to be rugged. And now on the other hand, if you're going to do a flat top and you're going to want to put a cool RMR style red dot on it, which is my preference, make sure you don't have that A2 on the front. Or if you do, make sure that it's leveled enough that you can, co-witness with whatever on there. Do what you need to do to that. But I'm going to tell you guys on a budget, nothing wrong with Ruger, nothing wrong with Smith & Wesson's M&P line. And you could probably get those. I don't know what they're running out in California, but usually those are right around the $500-$600 range. The Ruger might run you a little closer to $700, and you can do something special with that. So I don't know. What would you say? Any thoughts on what a next level one would be, Pete? What would you say is the next level, or are we going to build at that point?
Well, see, I would almost argue definitely go to a build for the second one.
Yeah,
without a doubt, because my first AR was Springfield Saint, I believe. Mm-hmm. Still one of my favorite.
It's a good gun.
And it's mid range. I think it was like $1,000 or somewhere in that area, 1,000 to 1,200. I don't honestly remember at this point. Really like it. Definitely liked and still love red dots. Most of my pistols have red dots. Most of my rifles have red dots. And mainly the reason why I like red dots on a rifle is it always comes back to that. If I'm going to be using this in a self-defense scenario, I'm not going to be doing distance shooting with this. That's not self-defense to me. Self-defense is close quarters, in the home, around the home. Mm-hmm. Red dot's going to make a lot of sense for that, right? It's just, for me, it does. Which is not to say that I don't have rifles for distance. I do. I've got one with a freaking awesome optic on it. It's awesome. But my second was a build. And I still remember when I got my Springfield Saint, I'm like looking at this thing, right? First, it was literally for me the first gun I ever bought. Like I didn't even have a pistol. This was my first purchase in the firearms world. And I was deathly afraid. I was like, I don't know how you take it apart. I don't know how you clean it. I don't know how you oil it. I didn't know anything, right? I didn't know a thing. And so the very next one I did was a build. And I got to tell you, that was the best move ever because that forced me to learn how everything actually worked. Yeah. The trigger, the fire mechanism, everything, the upper, all of it, the gas block, you had to learn it all. And then I was like, oh, I can do anything now because I understand how this firearm works. And it's actually the reason why I'm a really big fan of P80s because it forces you to learn your Glocks. And yeah. If you were like one of those people who's like, well, I don't want to take anything apart, dude, it's actually not that big of a deal. Yeah. But you kind of gotta force yourself to learn it.
Yeah. Well, and this is where I did have the benefit of my first gun. My first AR was an AR build. And I went through the whole process, and it gives you a whole different understanding. There's a whole different confidence that comes with that. And so many people are afraid. And I would tell people, I'm not very mechanically minded at all. I am not that. I'm not a gearhead. I don't get into fixing my own car. Minimal stuff that I'll do to my car. But there's a whole lot of good AR build videos on the internet, and you can walk through piece by piece.
I think I did Brownells. They got a whole series on building your AR.
Well, and I would encourage guys, like, jump on right now, find a high rated AR build video, screen grab it, and save that thing. Because we're probably coming to a day when YouTube's going to ban all those videos. And people found them on Vimeo and some other stuff, but just worth paying attention to. But yeah, that build makes a big difference. And so I'll even tell some of you guys, I think a lot of our first-time gun buyers, our first-time AR guys, don't really know the difference between an SBR and a pistol. So just so you know, you get under a certain inch length on your barrel on an AR, and you have to register it as a short barrel rifle, and you got to pay a $200 tax stamp. You got to wait for it. It's a mess. And then you're on a radar you probably don't want to be on. But if you have a pistol brace on it instead of a stock, which is a pretty simple thing, you don't have to register it as such. And so you can go with
and the lower has to have been registered as either a pistol or as an other. If your lower was registered as a rifle, you can't ever turn that into a pistol.
That gets kind of tricky, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does. And well, again, for our drinking friends here in California, we don't get to have any pistol AR lowers. Like you can't buy that. You can't buy it as an other or as a pistol. It's always going to be a rifle because they won't allow AR pistols in California.
So, something to pay attention to. That when it comes to building a pistol, you can accidentally break federal laws pretty easy. So just make sure you're checking with your guy at your gun store, making sure you're doing those things right, or don't care about it and just play the lottery.
I don't recommend playing the lottery, man. I don't. I honestly, I recommend you go the pistol route in a free state.
Yes. And,
or, the other option that I've heard is, because we've talked about this before, of manufacturing your own suppressor and then registering that. Obviously, you got to register it first with the ATF before you actually make it. But I've been told you can actually manufacture everything. Like you can manufacture your own SBR and suppressor and put that all on your form and file that. And again, if you're making it, I've heard it's way quicker to go through the ATF. Like we're talking 1 to 2 months as opposed to 9 to 10.
That's interesting.
So, just making SBR, and I'm talking about an 80%er making, right? I'm not talking about you bought a serialized gun. I'm talking you literally are making it, you're manufacturing it, and then you're registering all of that. And of course, you have to do that before, you have to register it all before you actually make it. And I think before you have all of the parts, that's part of the law is like, you can't have the parts just sitting around, which doesn't make any sense. Because if you have any guns at all, you have all the parts. Like you've already got it. So, but whatever.
Yeah. So here's a great thought though, because as we've kind of hinted at that, if you get an AR, you're probably planning to use it mostly for short range defense, either home defense or even in a more serious situation, close range. So my recommendation, you can hit up Pickett's Mill Armory. You can get short like pistol uppers for in the under the $400 range, right? You can buy a completed lower for a pistol, totally all made out. And then all you got to do is 2 pins to put it together. And you will probably be right at $600 or $700 on that whole build without an optic. And you've got something pretty nice there. Great recommendation for that. Or of course you can get yourself the lower, put it all together. I do recommend doing that if you can, but if you want to do it the quick way, buy your upper, buy your lower, put the thing together, and you're in pretty good shape. Of course, you can do that with a longer thing. You can do that with something more than a pistol, but there are ways to get a good mil-spec gun and not be breaking the bank. And so think about that. Think about Hollow Sun for an optic. But you guys out there that are thinking about doing your first build, now is not a bad time to do it. And I've just noticed the conversations in the last couple of weeks have changed. People are starting to think about ARs when before they're like, well, I've got my home defense gun, I've got enough. And now they're like, I need one more gun and it needs to be a fighting weapon. And so, yeah, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on buying that first AR-15, man. Any advice you would offer up?
Not in buying, but I would say this: if you ever have the thought, okay, I have enough, you don't. Let me throw that out there, because in my ideal world, I can't do this yet, mainly because my kids are so young. But in my ideal world, I would have strategically placed ARs all throughout my house, like very quick to get to in an emergency. Yeah. Right now, my kids are so young. I'm not playing that game with them. Everything is kept locked up. Yeah. It's kept ready to use. I've got certain safes that are, for me, very quick and easy to get into, but still there's a time delay, right? You're in an emergency situation, every second counts. But that's my risk tolerance with my family, right? Yeah. But in my ideal world, basically every room would have a strategically positioned, ready to go AR with the red dot on it. And it would probably be in an AR pistol format. Yeah. And if that meant I had to, do an 80%er and, not register it in California, I'd probably do it, but I don't do that. And I don't have an AR pistol until I can leave the state. I'd rather just leave and then not worry about it.
I don't blame you.
Because the problem in California, man, you just go to jail for 10 years. They're just going to throw you in jail, throw away the key, and not care about it.
And they're just not going to care.
Yeah.
Sucks, man. Well, here's one other thought I will say. I went backwards on my builds, and I built my AR. I built kind of a longer one. I think it's like an 18-inch. And I put a Vortex Strike Eagle optic on it that allows me to use it both for close and what I would call mid-range. Like I can reach out and touch up to about 600 yards, a man-sized target, right? Like that's the beauty of something like a Vortex Strike Eagle. You've got kind of the hash marks for your drop. It's a utilitarian rifle. Put a 223 Wild barrel on it. So, I mean, I can really stack rounds. So it makes it really fun for target shooting because I can dial at 100 yards, man. I'm squishing together rounds, that's not me being awesome. It's that if I've got the right, sandbags and all that kind of stuff. But I will say the benefit then is I've got a pistol and I've got a long, and so I can do kind of mid-range stuff. And I've got, I'm covering two different bases. Now we're going to start hopefully filling out to more of them. The other thing I've noticed is the more builds I do, the more parts I have left over. So like I buy my buffer tube and spring and all that kind of stuff. Well, then I buy the pistol brace and it's got a buffer tube in it. Now I got an extra buffer tube. And then, you do a build and you buy the oops kit for all the like stuff you might lose. Well, then you got the stuff from the oops kit in there, and so I'm noticing
buckets full of extra parts, literally buckets.
It doesn't take too long before you're like, oh, maybe you're 4 builds in and you're like, I think I have pretty much everything I need for another build. I'll just go and buy a bolt carrier group and I've got another build. And then you start saying, oh, well, I like this, handrail better than that one. So you switch them out. You got an extra one. That's the other benefit of builds is you start realizing you got extras. And
well,
something to keep in mind.
It is Legos for adults. I mean, that's really what ARs are.
Yeah.
And I really do want an A2 on one of mine, just because I want it. Like, I'm a red dot guy, but I want the A2 just because I kind of want that. I want the carry handle.
Yeah. Well, and I will say there's a ruggedness to that carry handle. There's not a lot to go wrong. Now, I've never liked aiming through those kind of round peep sights. It's just not my thing. Like I'm so used to the notched sights. It's what I prefer. But man, with those A2 handles, you can still do some pretty decent shooting. So nothing wrong with that. So anyway, that's just something I had in mind thinking about some of these builds that you guys might be doing. If you're thinking about doing your next big build, and you're wondering, or maybe you're thinking about buying that first AR, I'm going to tell you right now, you probably better do that sooner rather than later. If it's like, oh, I could pay off that credit card, in 2 months, or I could get this gun, I'm going to actually say this is the one time I might say, like, just pay the minimum on that, get this gun taken care of. We might be in one of those times where it's actually a little bit more important. So that's my thinking, Pete. I don't know if you have any thoughts to continue.
My only thought is one of the things a path I started to go down and haven't really committed to, and that's reloading. And I'd like to get the proper setup for reloading. Right now I got a single stage loader, and that's just a pain. Like it's a pain to do it. You can't do a decent amount of ammunition when you got a single stage. But I would actually say that that's probably a path that we want to start going down too. I mean, we already got states like California that are requiring a background check in order to buy ammunition. And unfortunately, part of our lawsuit, not obviously that I'm a part of the lawsuit, but I mean, us as a community against California and that law, is there are lots of people in California who are not able to buy ammunition, and therefore they're being denied their Second Amendment right because they don't have a birth certificate. So like one of the guys who was on the lawsuit, he's a Navy veteran and he was adopted. And this is back before, they really kept all the records like they do today. He has no birth certificate. So he can't get what they call a real ID here in California, that federally approved ID, because he can't prove who he is. And without that, he can't buy ammunition. He can't buy guns. He's being denied. So he was part of the reason, they used him as one of the people who was suing, going, he can't get ammunition and he should be able to. And, but right now, at least, you can still buy all the parts to make your own ammunition. Yeah. And that's why I recommend it.
And I will say with that, right now it's hard to get, primers and things like that, but that doesn't mean it's bad to get into reloading right now. I think long term, it's going to continue to be an important thing. And there's so many options. I think you mentioned you've got the single thing, but they make so many of these things that once you get it all, sized up, it's automatic, and you pull it once and every level, one is dropping one primer, one's adding another one's adding powder, another one's putting the, the bullet itself in, and you just keep doing like this, and it's essentially automated. And so you can just imagine, like, every time you pull something, you're reloading another round, and you do that for, how many times? Like I do that 100 times to save, sometimes 25 cents a round, like I'm like 4 pulls saves me $1. Heck yeah.
But not even I wouldn't even worry about the saving money aspect of it.
It's more about the being
because I think they're going to go nationally to where you got to have a background check to buy ammunition, because California has been the stomping ground and the proving ground for all the crazy laws. And now you got Biden in office, who's just going to adopt them all on a federal level. And honestly, I don't believe it's any of the state's business what I own. I'm pissed that they know about the stuff that they already know about, but I'm not telling them about anything else. Because there was a time not that long ago in California when you didn't have to do your private party transactions through a dealer. Honestly, I don't think that they need to know about any of the stuff that we did before all of that.
Yep. I'm with you. Well, and I in general don't want them to know about anything, which again makes that reloading all more valuable. It's one less thing. And people don't realize that you can make powder. There's ways to make your own gunpowder.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know that I would want to make my own gunpowder and then figure out the right amount of grams to be putting in and not blow up the gun.
We'll talk about this being in an emergency situation. It's possible, and more possible than you might think. I
imagine it's possible. I don't imagine it being something I would want to do, even in an emergency situation, because I know how bad it can go.
It can go. Well, you heard about Kentucky Gorilla and his whole situation with his 50 cal blowing up.
No, what happened there?
I don't know if you follow Kentucky Gorilla. He's one of the. He's not a super well known gun guy, but he's in that community. The same, like you've got Demolition Ranch, you've got Garand Thumb. Kentucky Gorilla is a smaller time of that, but he's legit. And he was doing a gun video and he was firing one of these like single shot 50 cal. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was just a hot round. There was something, and it was a manufactured round. And something went wrong, blew the thing up. His dad was filming, and so his dad was able to run over, administer first aid. But we're talking about he's got jagged cuts. It blew parts into his throat. He narrowly avoided dying because of a hot round. You watch the video. So now that he's out of the hospital, he kind of reviewed the whole incident. He's analyzing the video, and you're watching him fire. He's firing 3 or 4 rounds out of this, and you see the round that blew up, just a hotter round. There's flames are coming further out of the barrel. You see just the gun explode. It's terrifying. It sobers you a little bit on.
I met this guy at the range, and he blew up his 45 because he put a double dose of powder in it accidentally.
Oh man.
And I'm telling you, man, I'm like, okay. And you guys got to understand, if you haven't reloaded, there are books and magazines that tell you, okay, for this round, you need this much powder of this brand.
Yeah.
But if you're on this brand, it's this much powder. And so it's that important to know. I've made a bunch of 300 blackout rounds, and I still have yet to go fire one of them because part of me is I really don't want to die.
Yeah. So. Well, and I'll tell you, I had a friend, his father-in-law was reloading, and they say with reloading, it's simple, but you have to pay attention. You can't be doing anything else. You have to be so on. And he had apparently just like a squib load, where either you didn't put enough powder in or you didn't put any powder in, and it's just the cap and the round, right? Or a cap and the bullet in there. And so he's shooting, and the bullets are not making it all the way out of the gun. And so he did however many of those before he finally was like, what's going on? But he had 2 or 3 rounds in the barrel.
That's amazing that he didn't blow it up.
So think about what would have happened if he'd have had an actual hot round. So it's a good thing that he only had squib loads in there. If he'd have put a real round in there after you had not even 1, but 2 bullets stuck in that barrel, that'd have been it.
That's why when you're at competition, if the range officer all of a sudden starts yelling stop and is grabbing for your gun, it's usually because they noticed you got a squib. And they don't want you blowing up the gun right next to them because it's gonna hit them in the face.
Well, and a lot of people don't know about hanging fires. It doesn't happen often, but you ever heard of a hanging fire? You familiar with this at all? Where no. Hanging fire is where it is positive. It doesn't happen as much in modern ammunition, but I think it happens more on cowboy action rounds. Hold on, buddy. But you can actually have a round where the fire from the cap kind of rests on top of the powder. And instead of igniting it, it just kind of smolders on top and then catches later. And so you can have a round where you fire and nothing happens, but it's about to, where it's essentially late, almost like you think about the old flintlock rifles where the pan flashes and then there's a little delay. Same kind of concept can happen. Theoretically, it can happen in almost any kind of round. I think it happens more on these old cowboy action where they're intentionally lower powder load because they're not looking to make a lot of noise. There's a lot of things that go wrong. It's good to be attentive. Squib loads, hanging fires, they're no joke. Very rare, but they happen, and you want to be aware.
Squibs happen a lot in competitions because guys use reloaded ammo. Like they're making their own ammo, and they are putting as little powder as they possibly can. Yeah. So it has as little recoil as possible. Like they're just trying to put a hole in a piece of paper. They're not trying to punch a hole through a person. So you don't need as much powder.
Yeah. Oh man, which all the more then you think of if they can powder it too low, they can powder it too much. Yeah. And they definitely have to be careful. Anyway, that's all my thoughts today. Just want to talk a little bit about guns that you might be interested in buying if you are looking at your first AR. But anything else we got, Pete? No, that's it. Cool. All right. Well, in that case, I'll give my word to Lake Erie Arms. We continue to have guns in stock. We sell fast. We're staying busy, but we're keeping this in. We're keeping things moving. And so get on out if you can. We just finished that sale on the AR-15s, but we've still got a few in stock, as I understand. So get on out, get your AR. Now is the time to do it. And sign up for some training, and we will see you soon. Check out learms.net. All right, guys, we'll be back next week. Talk to you all then. Bye-bye. Bye.
You've been listening to the From Concealment Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.